When the Galactic Concorde first detected Earth's signals, there was mild curiosity but no real concern. Located in a quiet corner of a spiral arm, Earth was seen as a primitive planet with limited technology and no notable threats. The Concorde, a union of over 200 intelligent species, believed they had seen everything the galaxy had to offer: giants with armored hides, beings with acid blood, creatures who communicated through plasma bursts. But humans, they were soft, warm-blooded, slow compared to others, and entirely dependent on tools for survival. No claws, no fangs, no scales, no stingers. To the alien eyes, humanity seemed harmless. During first contact, the Concorde's delegation arrived in orbit, greeted by nervous world leaders and carefully prepared welcome messages. The aliens watched humans closely, studying their posture, their movement, their bodies. Observations poured in: no natural weapons, low muscle density, small teeth, no venom. The final report was clear: humans were non-predatory, tool-reliant, and emotionally volatile. The Concorde rated them as Class 4 diplomacy suitable, meaning harmless but potentially useful. What amused the delegation most was humanity's reliance on external items: knives, guns, fire. The idea of a species needing to build its strength rather than being born with it was laughable. In one light-hearted interstellar interview, an alien ambassador chuckled in front of a panel of Concorde citizens, waving one long, taloned hand as he said, "They have no natural weapons at all." Laughter echoed across multiple frequencies. Earth, meanwhile, celebrated its entry into the galactic community. Trade routes opened, human scientists began working alongside alien researchers, and cultural exchanges bloomed. Humans were eager, curious, and oddly adaptable, quickly learning alien languages and customs, even picking up interspecies games and music within months. But still, many Concorde citizens treated humans like children, interesting but weak. Aliens watched them with a sense of superiority, finding their emotions unpredictable and their laughter strange. And yet, there was something that lingered at the edges of every interaction, something hard to name. During an exchange visit on the Concorde's central station, a young Varnathi official accidentally spilled a drink on a human diplomat. She flinched, expecting anger, perhaps aggression. Instead, the human smiled. Broadly, warmly. But to the Varnathi, who came from a species that bared teeth only in blood duels, the expression triggered instinctive fear. She recoiled, shivering, and later reported the encounter to her superior. The file read, "The human displayed a threat display. I retreated accordingly." The report was dismissed, of course. "Just a misunderstanding," they said. Humans were simply strange, friendly, smiley. But then other stories began to surface. A human laughed after crashing a training ship. Another smiled while recounting a disaster that left them stranded in a desert. A soldier from a peacekeeping unit grinned after pulling a fellow officer from a burning building. It didn't make sense. Why do they smile in danger? Why do they bare their teeth in moments of stress or challenge? To the Concorde, smiles were not comforting. They were confusing. No one realized it then, but the seeds of doubt were beginning to grow. The galaxy had welcomed humanity with open arms, confident in their assessment that humans were weak, unarmed, and emotionally fragile. But what they didn't yet understand, what no scanner or analysis had revealed, was that humanity's greatest weapons weren't claws or fangs. They were something deeper, something old, something hidden just behind a smile. And the galaxy was about to find out. Life aboard the Concorde Academy station was a blur of colors, languages, and unfamiliar customs. Dozens of species moved through the corridors every day, their voices humming through the air in different tones, some with gestures, others with flashes of light or scent-based greetings. Among them, the humans had become a curiosity, newcomers with soft bodies and expressive faces, always eager to learn, but never quite blending in. Though friendly and respectful, they remained slightly apart, as if the rest of the galaxy couldn't quite figure them out. During interspecies orientation, students from across the Concord were encouraged to mix freely, sharing quarters, eating meals together, joining games and study sessions. Most species interacted politely with humans, intrigued by their creativity and humor, though always with a cautious distance. The humans laughed too easily, touched each other too casually, and made expressions that didn't translate well across species. Then came the incident in the mess hall, where everything changed. A Varnathi student named Callie, tall and graceful with glistening sapphire scales, was carrying a tray of nutrient fluid when she bumped into a human cadet named Lena. The drink splashed across Lena's uniform, staining the fabric instantly. The entire room froze. Tcalli's eyes widened in horror. She stumbled backward, her frills twitching in panic, expecting shouting or some form of retaliation. But Lena simply looked down at the mess, then up at the Varnathi, and gave her a wide, open-mouthed smile. Her teeth showed clearly. A friendly, reassuring gesture by human standards, an attempt to say, "It's okay, no harm done." But to Tcalli, it was a nightmare. The Varnathi species associated bared teeth with extreme aggression, a warning given only before a violent strike. In her culture, such a gesture meant, "I'm about to attack you." Without a word, Tcalli dropped her tray and fled the hall, trembling. Silence fell. The other alien students stared at Lena, unsure what had just happened. Lena stood confused, her smile fading as she looked around. Did I do something wrong?" she asked quietly. A Xendari medic moved over to check on her, while an instructor escorted the Varnathi away. Later, during a faculty review, the footage was replayed in slow motion. The image of Lena's smile froze on the screen. The room full of alien instructors sat still, unnerved. "That expression, what is that?" One whispered, his voice tight. Another, older species representative, leaned forward slowly. "It looks like a threat display," he said. But she said nothing aggressive. Her posture was relaxed. Confusion spread. Across different species, the meaning of bared teeth varied, but in most known societies, it was not a gesture of peace. For humans, however, it appeared to be the opposite. The staff tried to dismiss it as a misunderstanding, a cross-cultural moment that required more education and adjustment. Still, the image of that smile lingered in their minds. Over the following days, the Varnathi student refused to return to class. Lena tried to send her messages, apologizing, but received no reply. Meanwhile, whispers began to circulate. Other students recalled moments where humans smiled in tense situations, in debates, during combat simulations, or when facing difficulty. The pattern couldn't be ignored. Smiling, it seemed, wasn't just joy. It was control. It was challenge. It was the calm before something unpredictable. The Concord had labeled humans as peaceful, unarmed creatures, but now they weren't so sure. Something about that smile was wrong. Not dangerous, at least not yet, but definitely not harmless. And for the first time since humans joined the stars, someone finally asked a question no one had thought to ask. What else are they hiding behind those teeth? After the incident on the Concord Academy station, curiosity about humans began to shift into something else: concern, maybe even fear. A group of alien scholars, mostly historians and cultural analysts from various Concord species, decided it was time to understand these strange newcomers more deeply. They turned their focus to Earth's long, winding past, hoping to find answers buried in the old records, ancient images, and stories passed down through human generations. What they discovered unsettled even the most experienced researchers. Human history was not peaceful. It was a timeline of endless struggle, conflict after conflict, civilizations rising and falling, wars that scorched continents, revolutions that changed the shape of entire nations. But that wasn't what truly disturbed the scholars. It was the faces. In photo after photo, video after video, humans were captured in moments of intense danger and chaos, smiling. Soldiers grinning before charging into enemy lines. Firefighters laughing through ash-covered cheeks as they ran toward burning buildings. Explorers flashing bright, toothy smiles while stepping into deadly environments. It wasn't madness. It was something else, something primal. They smiled, while running into fire. One scholar whispered, staring wide-eyed at a war-era video of medics dragging wounded comrades to safety, all with open mouths and flashing teeth. To the aliens, such behavior was unnatural. Most species showed fear with retreat, submission, or camouflage. But humans seemed to face fear head-on and smile as they did. More disturbing were the ancient rituals, stories of warriors who painted skulls on their faces, athletes who celebrated broken bones, survivors of disasters who laughed under the weight of rubble. It seemed as if pain didn't crush the human spirit, it fed it. The scholars began to realize that the human smile had never just meant peace. It was used to comfort, yes, but also to intimidate. It was a declaration, "I'm not afraid." They found footage of a human pilot, severely injured, giving a bloodied grin to the camera before taking off on a final mission. There were old black and white photos of soldiers in trenches, smiling under rain and fire. Interviews with disaster survivors, faces smeared with dust, eyes red, but always smiling. One Sarnethi analyst, who specialized in reading predator signals, presented a report that made the entire research hall fall into silence. "This behavior," she said, pointing to an image of a grinning resistance fighter, "matches what we call dominance displays in apex predators. They are not just showing bravery. They are asserting control over fear itself." The room went still. That word, predator, had never been used to describe humans before. The Concorde had been so focused on what humans lacked physically, they had missed what they had evolved emotionally. Endurance, resilience, the ability to stare down danger and smile back at it. The team filed their findings into a new classification draft, quietly suggesting a re-evaluation of humanity's threat level. It wasn't their teeth that were dangerous. It was the meaning behind them. The smile wasn't a simple expression. It was a signal of something deeper, something forged over thousands of years of surviving the impossible. For the first time, the scholars felt a chill. Humanity had walked through fire, storm, blood, and shadow, not with terror, but with grins on their faces, and the rest of the galaxy was just beginning to understand what that really meant. The Concorde Council, now uneasy from the recent reports about human behavior, decided to calm the growing tension with a public display, a peaceful interspecies sparring demonstration to prove that humans, while spirited, posed no real threat compared to other galactic species. The idea was to settle doubts, reassure their citizens, and remind everyone that humans were physically average at best. The event was held in the great arena aboard the Central Concorde Station, a neutral ground used for training, games, and ceremonies. Representatives from multiple species arrived, some with curiosity, others with concern. When the human delegation was invited to participate, a single volunteer stepped forward, Cadet Aaron Hale, a young officer in training, calm and composed. There was nothing extraordinary about his build, average height, lean muscles, a relaxed stance. But what caught everyone's attention was the expression on his face. He was smiling, not out of nervousness, not to be friendly, but with something that looked far more unsettling to those who had studied humanity's history. Aaron's opponent was a seasoned sparring champion from the Drokari, a species with 4 arms and armored skin, built for combat from birth. The match began with formal gestures, but as soon as the signal sounded, Aaron exploded into action, not with wild violence, but with precise, calculated movement. He ducked low, dodged the Drokari's opening strikes, and used momentum and leverage instead of strength. He didn't have claws. He didn't need them. Every move he made was intentional, every step controlled. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the human twisted under a swing, swept a leg, and slammed the massive alien to the ground. Not once did Aaron show fear. He moved like someone who had been trained not just to fight, but to win, and to win smart. Within minutes, the Drokari was pinned, breathless, eyes wide in disbelief. The human had not roared. He had not growled. He had only smiled, and dismantled a warrior designed by evolution to dominate. The referee declared the match over. The room remained quiet. Then, a murmur began. A few claps. Then more, but not everyone applauded. In the observation deck, a senior Concord general leaned toward a fellow officer, eyes still locked on the human cadet, now helping his opponent to his feet. "They don't need natural weapons," he muttered. They became them. It was a terrifying realization. What the other species were born with, fangs, venom, armored scales, humans had replaced with discipline, adaptability, and something far more dangerous, the ability to learn and improve. Aaron didn't win because he was stronger. He won because he understood how to think like a predator, even without looking like one. The council, watching from their high chamber, exchanged uneasy glances. What began as a harmless event to prove human harmlessness had revealed something no one had expected. The human smile now held a new meaning. Not just strange, not just misunderstood. It was the expression of a creature who knew exactly how fragile they were and who had spent their entire history turning that weakness into strength. And as Aaron left the arena, still smiling politely, more than one alien turned to avoid his gaze, not out of disrespect, but because for the first time, they saw it clearly. Behind that quiet, simple expression was a mind that had evolved not to overpower nature, but to outsmart it. After the demonstration match, the Concord's opinion of humans could no longer remain based on physical appearances or shallow classifications. Curiosity turned into analysis, and analysis into something deeper, unsettled respect. Across the galaxy, alien scientists, military strategists, and scholars began re-examining human evolution with fresh eyes, no longer focusing on what they lacked, but on how they survived. Humanity, they discovered, did not grow fangs or produce venom. Their bodies didn't harden into armor, and their claws never came. Instead, their strength came from something far more dangerous than any natural weapon: each other. The humans had survived because of cooperation. They formed tribes, families, armies, not just to live, but to protect. When threats came, they didn't flee alone. They faced them together. Where one mind failed, many solved the problem. They built fire not from instinct, but from observation. They didn't grow faster legs, they carved wheels. They didn't evolve wings, they built ships to reach the sky. In every environment, from frozen wastelands to scorched deserts, they did not wait for their bodies to adapt. They adapted the world instead. It was a terrifying kind of power, not rooted in muscle, but in will. Their minds turned fear into invention, pain into strength, and every scar into a lesson. As the Concorde reviewed ancient Earth footage, the most disturbing moments were no longer the weapons or wars. They were the faces. Soldiers bleeding, yet smiling. Explorers starving, yet laughing. Survivors standing in the rubble of ruined cities with nothing left but the fire in their eyes and the teeth they showed when they said, "We're not done yet." That smile, once misunderstood, now felt like a cold wind through the council halls. They didn't survive because they were the strongest, one high-ranking Oricsan official said during a private summit, watching an old recording of disaster relief crews digging out victims with bare hands and still smiling through dirt and exhaustion. They survived because they refused to lose. And that was the core of it. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't built or born, it was chosen. Again and again, when logic said to quit, when nature said to die, humans said no. Their smile was no longer seen as soft or silly. It was an ancient signal passed through thousands of years of trial. It was the grin of someone who had seen worse and knew they could take it. That simple baring of teeth had become a mark of something deeper. Not submission, not friendliness, not madness. It was intention. It was a message. You may be stronger, faster, deadlier, but I will outlast you. For species that relied on instinct, on inherited defense, this revelation was disturbing. Humanity had invented its own instincts. Fear became a fuel. Struggle became culture. And cooperation became their evolution. The more the galaxy learned, the more they began to realize the human smile was not just misunderstood, it was dangerous. It didn't threaten with noise or violence. It warned with quiet confidence. It told you that you hadn't broken them yet. And when you saw it in the heat of conflict, when their faces were bloodied and bruised, and yet they still smiled, that was when you understood. They were not weak. They were just waiting, watching, choosing the moment to strike back, not with claws, but with the kind of strength you could never predict. And by the time you saw the teeth again, it was already too late. The galaxy had been holding its breath since humanity's strange power had come to light, an invisible strength that couldn't be measured by muscle or armor. While most Concord members chose to watch and learn, one rival faction, the Felzak Dominion, saw things differently. They believed the Concord had been fooled by fear and misunderstanding. To them, humans were still weak, a soft, unevolved species with clever tricks and empty threats. The Felzak had conquered dozens of systems through fire and fear, and they saw the humans rise as an insult to true strength. So they pushed. Minor border violations, attacks blamed on pirates, sabotage masked as accidents. The Concord tried to remain neutral, uncertain of how far to push back. But humanity didn't wait. They requested no fleet. They issued no warning. Instead, they arrived. One planet, one disputed system, no weapons drawn, no orbiting ships in formation. Just hundreds of humans stepping off transports in silence, forming perfect ranks on the surface of a contested world. No armor gleamed, no battle cries rose, only calm and smiles. The Felzak warlords watched from above, confused. Where are their tanks? One growled. Where are their beasts of war? Another demanded. But below, the humans stood unmoving, hands behind their backs, faces steady, and then they smiled. The same smile seen in old Earth footage, the one found in battlefields, in burning ruins, in the moments before disaster. That was when fear began to rise, not from numbers, not from strength, but from something deeper. The humans weren't threatening to attack. They were inviting one, confident, ready, patient. The Dominion had expected a fight, but what they saw unnerved them. These weren't soldiers who came to win by overwhelming force. These were survivors, each one carrying 1,000 years of war in their eyes. That smile didn't say, "We will fight." It said, "We've already won." No missiles launched, no weapons fired, and yet, within hours, the Felzak forces withdrew. They claimed strategic reassessment, but everyone knew what it really was: surrender. They had faced something they didn't understand, something they couldn't break. Later, during a private Concord hearing, a captured Felzak commando was asked why they retreated. His answer was quiet, shaken. "They saw our ships and laughed. Then they saw us smile." That sentence echoed across the stars, replayed in reports and broadcasts. For the first time in living memory, war had been stopped not with force, but with presence, with intent. The humans didn't need to show destruction. Their history was the warning. Their unity was the weapon. And their smiles, those were the last signal you'd see before your courage failed. The Concord issued a formal statement afterward, declaring the conflict resolved and the humans' actions unorthodox but effective. But behind closed doors, the tone was different. Respect had become caution. Admiration had become awareness. Humanity had proven that they didn't bluff, didn't posture. They acted with purpose, and they smiled with meaning. From that day on, the galaxy understood something it never truly grasped before. Humans did not fight to conquer or dominate. They fought because they refused to be broken. They walked into danger, not because they enjoyed it, but because they had faced worse and survived. The war never came. It didn't need to. Humanity had already shown the galaxy the most powerful truth of all. They were not afraid of the end, because they had been on the edge of it so many times, and smiled anyway. After the near war that ended without a single weapon fired, the galaxy's view of humanity shifted forever. The species once mocked for their soft skin and lack of claws were no longer seen as weak, but as something far more complex, dangerous not because they had to be, but because they chose not to be. Across Concord space, alien civilizations rewrote their cultural protocols for interacting with humans. What had once been simple curiosity about Earth's primitive species had grown into deep respect and careful diplomacy. Human ambassadors, once underestimated in every meeting, now held the floor with quiet power. They no longer had to raise their voices or show strength through ships. They only had to smile. And now the galaxy understood that smile. Sometimes it meant friendship, true, warm, and genuine. It meant peace, compassion, and a willingness to help rebuild what others had broken. But in certain moments, that same smile could mean something else. A warning, a promise, a memory of every time humanity had been pushed, burned, broken, and still stood tall. The Concord archives filled with accounts of Earth's long history, not just its wars, but its recoveries, not just its battles, but its forgiveness. In a universe where many species still held old grudges for generations, the humans were different. They didn't forget, but they learned. They chose civilization not because they were incapable of violence, but because they understood its cost. That was the heart of their strength, not restraint born of fear, but restraint born of wisdom. They had every reason to be dangerous, yet chose to build rather than burn. Human diplomats began leading peace talks across the galaxy. Their voices, calm and patient, carried the weight of a people who had seen the worst and still believed in better. When they smiled now, it wasn't a threat, but everyone knew it could be. That quiet tension brought an unexpected effect. Peace became more stable. Borders grew quieter. Pirate factions stepped back. Even old rivals between non-human worlds began to second-guess war, because if a single species could bring a galactic power to its knees just by walking forward and smiling, then maybe violence wasn't the only language worth speaking. On the 100th anniversary of Earth joining the Concord, a monument was unveiled on the central station. It was a sculpture of a human, not in armor, not holding a weapon, but simply standing tall with a peaceful smile on their face. Underneath, a plaque bore words in every major language of the galaxy, and while many stood reading it in silence, the meaning was understood long before their translators finished. It was the truth that every species now accepted, no matter how different their biology or history. It was not Earth's weapons that had made them powerful, not their machines or their technology, not even their cleverness alone. It was the choice, the strength to hold the blade and put it down, to fight when needed, but not because it was easy, to smile even in fear, not as surrender, but as signal, not weakness, but readiness. The monument stood as a reminder not just of humanity's past, but of what peace truly meant when it came from those who had earned it through fire. And as the stars turned slowly above, a new species joined the Concord one by one. That final line echoed across generations. They thought we had no natural weapons, but they were looking in the wrong place.